In the winter of 1843, a set of handwritten medical records was quietly removed from circulation at St. Bartholomew's Infirmary in Boston. There was no announcement, no official explanation, and no notation in the hospital's public registry. The decision was made behind closed doors by men who had devoted their lives to reason, structure, and scientific order. Yet the files they sealed away represented something that reason alone could not contain.
Ever wondered where you really come from? Not the stories, but the science. On this channel, we decode real DNA, uncover lost ancestries, and bring ancient genomes to life through cinematic storytelling. If that excites you, subscribe for weekly insights. Like the video to support science-based history. And drop a comment. Your questions help guide what we explore next.
The documents concerned a single patient, a boy named Samuel Arkwright. For decades afterward, physicians who trained at St. Bartholomew's spoke of the case only in fragments and always in lowered voices. Some claimed the records were exaggerated, distorted by superstition and fear. Others insisted the story had been deliberately altered to protect reputations. But among those who had actually examined the boy, there was a quieter agreement. Whatever Samuel was, whatever had happened to him, it was real enough to leave scars on the people who witnessed it. Samuel arrived at the infirmary just after dawn on January 17th, carried in by his uncle after collapsing during morning prayers at a boarding house on the city's western edge. He was 10 years old, thin, neatly dressed, and outwardly calm. According to the intake notes, he appeared more embarrassed than distressed, apologizing repeatedly for the inconvenience as nurses examined him. Nothing about Samuel suggested illness. His pulse was steady, his breathing slow and regular, his skin warm, his pupils responsive to light. He answered questions clearly, politely, with a vocabulary that surprised more than one attendant. When asked why he had collapsed, Samuel paused, frowned slightly, and said he wasn't sure. He remembered kneeling, then standing, then being lifted off the floor. The attending physician, Dr. Lawrence Whitcomb, initially suspected exhaustion or fainting brought on by poor nutrition. Samuel's parents had died of influenza the previous year, and the boy had been moved between relatives ever since. Emotional stress, Whitcomb reasoned, often manifested in children in strange but ultimately harmless ways. Samuel was admitted for observation. It was meant to be routine. He was placed in a shared ward, given broth and bread, and instructed to rest. The first episode occurred just after noon. A nurse noticed Samuel sitting upright in his bed, eyes open, hands folded in his lap. She asked if he needed anything. He did not respond. Assuming he hadn't heard her, she repeated the question louder. Still nothing. When she touched his shoulder, his body shifted slightly, adjusting to the pressure, but his expression did not change. Whitcomb was called. He found Samuel exactly as described, awake, breathing, eyes focused, but entirely unreachable. When the doctor snapped his fingers inches from the boy's face, there was no blink. When he spoke Samuel's name, there was no recognition. Then Whitcomb did something he would later regret. He pressed a metal probe, still warm from sterilization, against Samuel's forearm. There was no reaction, no flinch, no cry, not even a tightening of the jaw. The skin reddened, the smell of scorched fabric filled the air. Samuel remained still. Whitcomb withdrew the instrument at once, shaken. He later wrote that in that moment, the ward seemed to grow unnaturally quiet, as if the building itself were listening. After approximately 17 minutes, Samuel inhaled sharply, blinked, and looked around. "Did I fall asleep?" he asked. He noticed the mark on his arm and asked how he'd gotten it. The nurse crossed herself. Dr. Whitcomb said nothing. That was the beginning of the case that would follow Samuel for the rest of his short life and long after his disappearance. A case that forced doctors to confront a possibility none of them had been trained to consider: that consciousness could leave the body behind, and that the body, disturbingly, did not seem to mind. By the end of that first week, Samuel Arkwright was no longer considered a routine patient. Dr. Whitcomb ordered that the boy remain under constant supervision, not because Samuel was dangerous, but because no one could predict when he would vanish again while remaining physically present. The episodes followed no discernible pattern. Sometimes they came while Samuel was eating, his spoon pausing halfway to his mouth as his eyes drifted into that distant, unfocused state. Other times they arrived in the middle of conversation. One moment he would be answering a question, the next his voice would trail off, his lips parting slightly, as if he were listening to someone no one else could hear.
During these absences, Samuel's body behaved with unnerving precision. He did not slump or lose balance. His posture remained upright, muscles engaged just enough to support him without conscious effort. When guided by the arm, he walked without resistance, navigating hallways and staircases with an ease that suggested intention, even though there was no sign of awareness behind his eyes. Nurses began to dread their shifts in the ward where Samuel was housed, not out of fear exactly, but discomfort. There was something profoundly unsettling about standing beside a child who looked awake, who breathed and moved like anyone else, yet was utterly unreachable. Several attendants reported the same sensation independently, a feeling that Samuel was no longer alone inside himself during these episodes. Dr. Whitcomb expanded his examinations. He tested Samuel's reflexes with careful precision, tapping knees and elbows, observing normal responses even while the boy remained absent. He applied pressure to sensitive areas, pinched skin hard enough to leave deep bruises, pricked fingers until blood welled. Nothing penetrated. The body reacted in textbook fashion, but there was no sign of pain, no withdrawal driven by awareness. More troubling still was Samuel's apparent perception without engagement. Objects moved across his field of vision drew his gaze, but his eyes did not settle on them with curiosity or recognition. They tracked motion the way a compass follows magnetic north, mechanically, faithfully, without understanding. On the fourth night, an orderly accidentally dropped a metal tray near Samuel's bed, the crash echoing through the ward. Other patients startled awake. Samuel did not so much as blink. Whitcomb recorded everything, filling page after page with observations written in increasingly cramped script. He crossed out words like trance and catalepsy, dissatisfied with their implications. Those conditions implied diminished function. Samuel's body was functioning too well. When consciousness returned, Samuel expressed mild confusion, nothing more. He asked why people kept staring at him. He apologized again for causing trouble. When told he had been unresponsive for nearly an hour, he frowned, clearly unconvinced. "That doesn't feel right," he said. "I was only gone for a moment." When pressed on where he had gone, Samuel hesitated. He searched for words the way a child might when describing a dream that refused to stay still. "Not gone," he corrected, "just elsewhere." Whitcomb noted the phrase without comment, though it lingered in his thoughts long after the boy fell asleep. The hospital's senior staff were briefed. Consultations were requested. Physicians from neighboring institutions arrived to observe the boy, some skeptical, others openly fascinated. Each left unsettled. None could offer an explanation that fit cleanly within accepted medical doctrine. Then, Samuel began saying things he should not have known. The first instance was dismissed as coincidence. During a lucid interval, Samuel remarked that one of the doctors walked as though his left leg hurt, even when he pretended it didn't. The physician laughed it off until an examination later revealed an early joint infection. The second instance was harder to ignore. Samuel described a patient in the surgical ward who would not survive the night,
though the man's condition was considered stable. He spoke calmly, without drama, as if stating a simple fact. The patient died before dawn from an internal rupture no one had anticipated. By the third instance, Whitcomb ordered that every word Samuel spoke during lucid periods be recorded verbatim. What emerged was a pattern that no one wanted to acknowledge. Samuel did not speculate. He did not guess. He stated outcomes with quiet certainty, often days or hours before events unfolded exactly as he described. When asked how he knew these things, Samuel seemed genuinely puzzled by the concern. "I've already seen them," he said once, irritation creeping into his voice. "Why do you keep asking me the same questions?" That was when the case stopped being a medical curiosity and became something far more dangerous. The doctors began to realize that Samuel's absences were not empty. Whatever claimed his consciousness during those periods was showing him things the rest of them could not see, and bringing him back with knowledge that refused to be dismissed. And if that was true, then the hospital was no longer studying a sick child. It was hosting a window. The shift in how Samuel Arkwright was regarded happened quietly, without any formal declaration. No memo circulated, no meeting was called to redefine his status. Yet the change was unmistakable. The doctors stopped discussing how to cure him and began debating how to contain him. By early February, Samuel's presence had altered the rhythm of St. Bartholomew's Infirmary. Staff schedules were adjusted to ensure experienced attendants were always nearby. Doors that had once remained open were now kept closed. Whitcomb instructed nurses not to argue with the boy during his lucid periods, not to challenge his statements, and most importantly, not to ask leading questions. He feared that curiosity, once indulged, would invite answers no one was prepared to hear. Despite these precautions, information continued to emerge. Samuel's episodes grew longer, sometimes lasting the better part of a day. During these extended absences, his body remained remarkably stable. He neither ate nor drank unless prompted, yet showed no signs of dehydration or weakness. His pulse remained even. His temperature rarely fluctuated more than a fraction of a degree. It was as if his body entered a state of perfect maintenance, sustained by some internal order that required no conscious oversight. Doctors began to test this hypothesis in increasingly invasive ways. Whitcomb justified the measures as necessary for understanding a condition that defied every known framework. He authorized overnight vigils, timed stimuli, controlled disruptions to Samuel's environment. Lights were extinguished and relit, bells rung, floors vibrated deliberately beneath his feet. Nothing disturbed the absence. One experiment, recorded in painful detail, involved placing Samuel at one end of a narrow corridor during an episode and releasing a large dog at the other. The animal, trained for hospital security, charged forward, barking aggressively. Samuel did not react. At the last possible moment, without quickening his pace or changing his expression, he stepped aside just far enough for the dog to pass without contact. The handlers were shaken. The dog refused to approach Samuel again. Whitcomb wrote that night that Samuel's body appeared to be guided by information his mind was receiving from elsewhere, not through senses, but through certainty. The staff could no longer agree on whether Samuel was present during these episodes or profoundly absent. Some argued that his consciousness was heightened, expanded beyond ordinary perception. Others believed he was empty, his body operating on instinct alone while his mind wandered untethered. Samuel himself offered no clarity. When lucid, he remembered none of what occurred during the absences, yet he spoke of them without fear. He compared them to stepping out of a noisy room into quiet air. "It's easier there," he said once. "Nothing is trying to be unfinished." That sentence disturbed Whitcomb more than any prediction Samuel had made. The predictions continued. a fire in a tenement 2 streets away, a collapsed lung in a patient whose cough had seemed benign, the sudden death of a nurse's husband struck by a runaway carriage on a road Samuel had never seen. Each time the accuracy was undeniable. Each time the staff grew more uneasy. Doctors began to keep secrets from one another, afraid of being the next subject of Samuel's calm observations. Some avoided him entirely, refusing to enter his ward unless absolutely necessary. Others lingered too long, compelled by a need to understand what they were witnessing, even as it eroded their confidence in everything they had been taught. Then came the night that forced administrative intervention. On February 22nd, Samuel entered an episode shortly after dusk. Instead of remaining where he was placed, he stood from his bed and walked out of the ward. No one stopped him. The nurses, accustomed to his movements, followed at a distance. Samuel navigated the infirmary with unerring precision. He descended a staircase without touching the railing, turned corners without hesitation, and stopped in front of a locked door leading to the surgical theater. He stood there for nearly an hour. Inside, a late operation was underway. A young man injured in a factory accident lay open on the table as surgeons worked frantically to stem internal bleeding.
Witnesses later reported that as Samuel stood outside the door, his lips moved almost imperceptibly. A murmur, too soft to hear, escaped him. Those closest said it sounded like counting. At precisely 11 minutes past 9, the patient inside died. Samuel turned, walked back to his bed, and sat down. When asked the next morning why he had gone to the surgical wing, Samuel looked genuinely surprised. "I didn't," he said. "I was busy." The phrase sent a chill through everyone present. Within days, hospital administrators demanded answers Whitcomb could not give. They questioned whether Samuel's presence was compromising care, affecting staff morale, or worse, influencing outcomes in ways that bordered on superstition. Whitcomb defended his work with clinical language, but privately he knew the truth was slipping beyond his control. Samuel was not observing events as they unfolded. He was arriving after they had already happened, returning with knowledge that made the present feel delayed, almost artificial. That realization would follow Whitcomb into his sleep, and it would mark the moment when Samuel's story ceased to be merely unsettling and became profoundly dangerous to the people sworn to understand him. By March, it was clear that Samuel Arkwright could no longer be treated as a patient in the conventional sense. His episodes had lengthened to days at a time, and his body, though unharmed, seemed sustained by forces no one could measure. The hospital staff began speaking of him in hushed tones, calling him the boy who walks elsewhere, or simply the absence. Doctors who had once prided themselves on mastery over life and death found themselves powerless. Samuel predicted events with terrifying accuracy, spoke of places he could not have visited, and recounted details of people he could not have known. Those who spent prolonged time near him reported strange dreams, fleeting glimpses of memories that were not their own, and an unsettling sense that reality itself had thinned. Whitcomb and the hospital board made the decision to transfer Samuel to a private facility in upstate New York, run by individuals claiming expertise in unusual cases of consciousness. The departure was quiet, conducted late at night, with Samuel in one of his extended absences, standing motionless while attendants carried him to a specially reinforced carriage. After that night, Samuel's story faded from Boston, leaving only the fragments recorded in Whitcomb's journals. The facility where he was sent closed abruptly a few years later, with records lost or destroyed. To this day, no one knows what became of him. Samuel Arkwright's story haunted those who witnessed it because it confronted the limits of human understanding. His body functioned without his mind perceived beyond space and time,
and the knowledge he carried challenged everything medicine, philosophy, and common sense could explain. He was not sick, not broken, not wrong. He existed in a state between what is known and what cannot be measured. Doctors who tried to comprehend him were left with only questions. What is consciousness? Can awareness exist independently of the body? And most haunting of all, if Samuel could traverse realms ordinary humans cannot, what else might be hidden in the unseen corners of our world? The boy vanished into history, but his presence lingers in the margins of medical thought, a reminder that some mysteries are too vast to resolve, and that human understanding may always be incomplete.